Mieczysław Weinberg is one of the most intriguing composers to me and has been since the first notes I ever heard from him. Uh, this is a man whose tragedies piled one upon another. And I'm not sure he had many choices, but if he had any choices, he seems to have made the wrong ones about his life. So, a Polish Jew in the time of World War II, living in Poland, his parents were musicians. He grew up destined to be that. And suddenly, the German army is moving towards Poland. And his parents wisely told him that he should get out of there. By the way, they did not, and his sister did not, and they all ended up in the gas chambers. But he did flee. Unfortunately, unlike many other Jews who went west, isn't that a saying? Go west, young man. He went east. And he went first to Ukraine and continued his studies. But then the Russians continued also going east. And he fled once more, actually to Tashkent, where he got married and went on with his life for a bit until Shostakovich, the great Russian composer Dmitri Shostakovich, saw a piece by Weinberg and was so taken with it that he actually got in touch with this slightly younger composer and asked him to go to Russia, which was the next mistake. Weinberg moved to Moscow, and unfortunately, being a Polish Jew in the time of Stalin, he was again ignored, persecuted. His music was played, but minimally. He became great friends with Shostakovich, and he was not a student of Shostakovich, but he called himself a kind of student, as much a student as anybody could be without being a student. But that was not exactly the relationship because the two of them really benefited from each other. There are aspects of Shostakovich's music which are clearly taken from things that Weinberg did. I'm thinking particularly literary things. Things that interested Weinberg became interesting to Shostakovich, particularly aspects of Jewish suffering. Both of them suffered under Stalin, but Weinberg was never seen as a Russian. He spent the rest of his life there, but was never really accepted. The sheer output of music is astonishing. There are dozens of symphonies, dozens of string quartets, I mean, hundreds of pieces. And in addition to all of this serious music, the situation he was in Russia meant that it was very difficult for him. He couldn't get a teaching job. And so he made a living writing yet more music for films and for cartoons even. That's how he generated income. By the end of his life, which was in the 1990s, he was very little known outside of some Russian musicians who played great Russian musicians who played the music. Emil Gilels played it, Rostropovich played it, some of the big conductors, but it was really limited to there. In the last 10, 15, 20 years since his death, it's begun to seep out into the rest of the world. And we've all come to understand what a significant and major composer this is. What a voice. I honestly and truthfully say to people, much to their shock, that I believe he's a greater composer than Shostakovich. In my mind, Weinberg is not less, not equal to, but really stands above to me. There is an incredible individuality to the voice. And although I always hesitate describing music and the impact of music and the sound of music in words because they're inadequate and probably misleading, the way I would try and describe his music in words is the first and most apparent aspect is power. This is not soft feeling music. This is not French Impressionism. This is not Italian lightness. And it's not even a kind of Russian folk-oriented music of Rimsky-Korsakov or Tchaikovsky or anything like that. This is incredible, concentrated, packed power which explodes in sound, and it's visceral. You are totally impacted by the power of this music coming to you, the energy, the drive, the aggressiveness. This is the music that goes out and grabs you in your seat. This is not music that you sit back and it kind of wafts over you. It draws you. It doesn't draw you in. It clobbers you and drags you in. And it's very individual. There is a kind of relationship to Shostakovich, which is quite natural. They were close friends. They knew exactly what each other was writing. They listened to each other's music, and it's a cousin. Perhaps not quite a first cousin, maybe a second cousin, but you could put them in the same league, possibly the same ballpark. So there's a kind of relationship with that. But when I see how popular and accepted and embraced the music of Shostakovich is, this is that with more depth, with more profundity to me. It's difficult to play. It's really difficult to play. But I have put together this piano quintet, which is a big piece. It's a major, big introduction for those who haven't heard him to really the best of what Weinberg is. And I put together a group which I believe will be truly magnificent. The pianist is Katya Skanovi, who is from a very famous Russian family. Her grandfather was a great filmmaker. She grew up in this culture with these people. She studied with the people that would have been Weinberg's contemporaries, and she's the kind of Russian trained pianist. It's like the Olympics. When they send somebody, uh, they're going to nail it or they're going to Siberia. She's that good. And she knows the culture and she knows the music. She knows what this should be. So we have her. Then, secondly, uh, the first violin is John Storgard's. John is one of the preeminent conductors in our world today, with several major orchestras uh, and guest conducting all the great orchestras in the world, but happens to be a magnificent violinist, loves to come here in the summer and spend a week not waving a stick and hearing the sound come back, but actually making the sound himself, which is a very different endeavor. And he loves playing chamber music with these good people. He's known Katya for a very long time. And as a conductor, he knows the entire output of Weinberg. So coming to play a piano quintet, it's not someone who only knows the music of his instrument or maybe a couple of chamber music. He knows all of it and will bring to that a real understanding and commitment to this piece. The others performing are my real go-to people for seasoned, wonderful, mature, great musicians of chamber music who all know each other. And that's Ida Kavafian, her husband, Steve Tenenbaum, viola, and Eric Kim, cello. None of them, except for John and Katya, will have known the piece because, as I said, he's still strangely emerging 20 years after his death, which, by the way, is not that unusual. If you think of some people like Bach and Bartok and Mahler and many others who were not that well known in their lifetimes and who we can't imagine at this point not having been well known in their lifetimes because it's so important. But having this combination is something I also really like to do, where a couple of people in the group know exactly, and the others are discovering, because the essence of chamber music is collaboration. And the knowledgeables and the discoverers both bring something. Being knowledgeable, you're not seeing it for the first time. Being a discoverer, you might see something which the knowledgeable people didn't. And so everybody is energized, and energy is the name of this piece.